Tonight, I'll take you to a silent abbey on a snowy mountain where everyone believes time has forgotten the place. Everyone except one gentle black cat. While the valley sleeps far below, this quiet guardian walks through frozen courtyards, moonlit chapels, and a lonely bell tower, keeping old memories warm so they never fade. As the snow falls softly outside and the night grows silver and still, let the black cat of the Silent Abbey watch over you too and guide your thoughts into deep, peaceful sleep. High above the valley, where the world thinned into sky and snow, the abbey slept against the side of the mountain. It had been built from pale stone that seemed almost the same color as winter itself, so that from far below, it looked like a soft, quiet shape pressed into the white. The roofs were bowed with snow. The cloister garden lay under a gentle blanket of frost, and the old well in the courtyard held only a circle of dark, still water that reflected the silver of the stars. At night, the wind moved around the walls in long, slow breaths, like a creature asleep, and the whole place felt wrapped in a peaceful, timeless dream. On clear nights, when the clouds broke apart, the moon hung low over the mountain, wide and bright and patient. Its light slid over the worn stones and thin, empty windows, turning each edge into a soft line of silver. Icicles hung from the gutters like delicate glass bells, catching every glimmer, every faint shimmer of starlight. Snow settled in little drifts along the steps, on the ledges, in the corners of the cloister, smoothing all the sharp angles, softening everything it touched. From the valley, the abbey looked still and distant, as if made not from rock and wood, but from quiet itself. For the people below, it was a place of old stories. In the evenings, when the fires were banked low and the lamps burned small, they spoke of the abbey in slow voices. They said that once, long ago, monks had lived there, rising with the dawn and walking in simple sandals through the snow. They had grown herbs in narrow beds along the walls, brewed dark teas to warm cold hands, and copied books by lamplight in a library that smelled of ink and leather. The villagers spoke of chanted prayers that had floated down the mountain like a soft mist, of bells that rang clear and gentle in the night, steady as a heartbeat. But that was long past, they said now. The abbey was empty. The prayers had faded. The bells had fallen silent. Only the stone remained, and the snow and the wind. The truth was quieter and softer than their stories. The abbey was not entirely alone. Inside, behind the heavy wooden doors, and beneath the snow-covered roofs, there was movement as light as breath on a mirror. In the stillness of the long corridors, where lanterns no longer burned and no sandals brushed the floor, a pair of eyes watched the night. They were round and golden, deep and calm, holding the pale glimmer of stars reflected in the glass of a window. The eyes belonged to a small, sleek body, black as ink, black as the sky just before the moon rises. A black cat lived in the Silent Abbey, and it did not think of the place as abandoned. To the cat, it was simply home. During the day, when the sun rose late and low over the ridge and the snow shone with a soft, pearly light, the cat slept in warm, hidden corners. It chose spots where the pale beams of winter sunlight spilled through narrow windows and pooled on the stone. Sometimes it curled on a sill, tail wrapped neatly around its paws, eyes half closed as it watched the slow dance of snowflakes drifting past the glass. Sometimes it stretched long across a folded, forgotten blanket in a small room that had once held a guest's bed. The air was cold, but the cat's fur was thick, and where a ray of sunlight touched the stone, a gentle warmth rose. The silence in the daytime was deep but not heavy, not empty. It was a living quiet, filled with faint echoes and soft memories, and the cat seemed to rest in it like a fish in calm water. When evening came, it came slowly. Shadows lengthened in the corridors, climbing the walls like gray vines. The light in the courtyard faded from gold to blue, and the edges of the snow grew soft and indistinct. One by one, the stars appeared over the ridge, thin and distant at first, then more numerous, more steady, as the sky deepened into a blue so dark it was almost black. The cat would wake then, lifting its head and listening to the gentle hush of the abbey, as if a soft voice had called its name. It stretched in a long, smooth curve, claws scratching lightly against old wood, and let out a small, silent yawn that no one saw. Then, with practiced ease, it leapt down from its resting place and padded out into the corridor, paws making no sound at all on the stone. The first part of its nightly journey was always the same. The cat moved along the main hall, where tall, arched windows looked out over the snow-covered mountainsides. The glass was faintly fogged by the difference between outside cold and inside cold, a delicate blur that made the world beyond look even more like a dream. The cat paused at each window, looking out over the sleeping valley far below. Sometimes, tiny orange lights flickered there, lamps in the villagers' homes, like little pieces of stars that had fallen to the earth. The cat watched them for a moment, its golden eyes soft and steady, as if it were counting each light, as if it were quietly keeping watch over every small, distant life. At the end of the hall, a heavy door led into the cloister, and the cat slipped through a narrow gap where wood had shrunk with winter. Outside, the air was crisp and very still. The cloister garden lay in a square of perfect white, bordered by stone columns and arched walkways. The herbs were asleep beneath the snow, their shapes only faintly visible, like thoughts half remembered. The bare branches of a single leafless tree rose from the center, its thin twigs traced in white, each one outlined in frost. Above, the sky was wide and gentle, spangled with stars that shimmered softly, and the moon, when she was full, poured down a silver light that made every footprint, every shadow, look delicate and clear. The cat crossed the cloister on light paws, leaving a trail of small, perfect prints. It visited the base of the tree, circled it once, and brushed its side against the cold stone of the low wall that edged the beds. There was a rhythm to this walk, a quiet pattern repeated night after night. The cat did not hurry. It moved with an easy, peaceful grace, as if it had all the time in the world. Each step seemed to say, "The Abbey is here. The snow is here. The stars are here. Memory is here." The wind, when it rose, only slightly, touched the cat's whiskers and turned the air into a soft, whispering song. Close by, under another arch, the entrance to the old refectory stood half open. The cat slipped inside to check the long tables and the benches. Here, once, many hands had folded in silent gratitude before simple meals. Now, the room was empty, but the air still held a faint, comfortable scent of wood smoke and dry bread. Moonlight filtered in through a high, small window, painting long, quiet stripes on the floor. Dust motes turned in that pale beam, slow and gentle, like tiny snowflakes caught under water. The cat watched them, sitting very still, tail wrapped around its paws, eyes calm. It seemed to listen, not for sound exactly, but for something softer, a memory, a feeling, a presence that rested in the stones themselves. From the refectory, the cat moved on, returning to the corridor that led to the front of the abbey. There was a great wooden door there, banded with iron, facing the steep path that climbed up from the valley. Snow drifted against it in a quiet heap, and the key in the lock was long rusted and still. Yet the cat always visited this door, as if honoring an old habit, an old promise. It sat beside the threshold and looked up at the iron ring, then turned its gaze to the small window above, where a faint square of night could be seen. Sometimes the cat would close its eyes here and simply breathe, letting the quiet soak in. It was a gentle, steady quiet, like the moment between the inhale and exhale of a sleeping world. Once, long ago, a bell had hung in the tower above this door, and it had rung at dawn and at dusk, and sometimes in the deep of night. Now, the bell almost never sounded, but the mountain remembered its voice. On certain evenings, when the air was very clear and the snow lay thick and still over every stone, a faint vibration seemed to pass through the walls. It was not a sound that reached the village, nor something that could be easily heard. It was more like a soft hum that lived inside the stone itself, a ghost of a chime, a hint of a gentle, silver note. When it came, the cat would lift its head, ears pricked, eyes wide and bright. For a breath, the abbey seemed to wake slightly, its memories stirring like leaves beneath the snow. As the first night of our tale settles fully around the Silent Abbey, the mountain lies wrapped in a deep, peaceful silence. The snow falls in slow, soft flakes that drift past the windows and gather in gentle layers along the roof. The stars watch from above, steady and patient, shining on the stone, on the cloister, on the frozen fountain that glimmers faintly in the courtyard. Inside, in hallway and cloister, refectory and garden, the black cat completes its quiet circuit. It is the unseen guardian of this place, the gentle keeper of its memories, moving softly through the silver-lit shadows so that nothing is truly lost, so that the abbey does not fade entirely into emptiness, but remains, like a dream that someone is still holding, warm and safe in the palm of a hand. When the moon was high and the night had settled into its deepest blue, the abbey became a world of soft reflections and silver edges. The snow outside glowed faintly, as if it held its own pale light, and the walls inside caught every glimmer that slipped through narrow windows. In this quiet hour, when the valley lay far below in sleep and no human eye watched the mountain, the black cat began its true rounds. It was not a duty imposed from outside, not a task given by any hand or voice. It was simply the way of things now, as natural and steady as the turning of the seasons or the slow fall of snow. The cat emerged from its chosen resting place, a small alcove near the heart of the abbey, where a cracked window let in a thin band of moonlight that lay like a silver ribbon across the floor. It moved with the easy grace of something entirely at home, its black fur shining faintly whenever it crossed a patch of light. Its paws were soft and sure on the stone, and it seemed almost to float rather than walk, each step light, unhurried, and precise. The air was still and cool, carrying just a hint of old incense, dry wood, and the delicate sharpness of snow. The cat paused, lifted its head, and listened, not because it expected danger, but because listening had become another part of its gentle ritual. The first corridor it walked each night was long and straight, lined with simple wooden doors that opened into small, empty rooms. Once, these had held narrow beds, folded blankets, and small chests of simple belongings. Now, they held dust and quiet and the soft weight of forgotten prayers. As the cat passed each door, it slowed, nose tilting toward the wood, whiskers brushing the air. Sometimes it would stop, lean its small body against a door frame, and linger there for a moment, as if acknowledging some invisible presence. In the hush of the hallway, a memory stirred, a murmur of voices at dawn, the rustle of robes, the faint creak of beds, as tired bodies rose to meet the cold morning. These sounds did not truly return, but impressions of them trembled in the stone, and the cat moved on with a calm, protective patience, as though making sure those dreams remained undisturbed. At the end of the corridor, an archway opened into a small passage that turned sharply and then descended by a handful of shallow steps. Here, the walls were closer and the ceiling lower, and the air seemed even cooler, touched by the hidden heartbeat of the mountain. The cat's eyes shone softly in the dimness, catching and holding what little light there was, like small, steady lanterns. The passage led to a side door that opened stiffly, and only a little onto a narrow balcony carved into the outer wall of the abbey. The cat slipped through the gap and stepped into the night. Outside, the world was wide and silent and beautifully still. The balcony was edged by a low parapet surprisingly smooth beneath its dusting of snow. Beyond it, the mountain fell away in a long, gentle slope, its surface softened beneath thick layers of white. The valley lay far below, wrapped in its own quiet dream, its fields invisible now, its river a silver thread only guessed at beneath the snow. The sky overhead was a deep, serene indigo, scattered with stars that seemed to pulse slowly, as if breathing. The moon, large and calm, floated just above the opposite ridge, its light settling over everything in a peaceful, steady glow. The cat walked the length of the balcony, tail drifting behind it like a shadow. It paused at each end, looking out into the distance with patient, golden eyes. There were no threats here, no intruders, no sudden movements, only the soft fall of new snowflakes, the faint sigh of the wind moving high among the peaks, and the deep, quiet presence of the mountain itself. Still, the cat watched, because watching was its gift. It watched for changes, however small. A new drift of snow piled against the wall, a tiny crack in a stone, a different tilt in the way the wind brushed the surface of the snow. These subtle shifts were not troubling. They were simply part of the living, breathing rhythm of the place, and the cat noted them in its calm, silent way, then turned back toward the door. Inside again, the abbey felt even more peaceful by contrast, a soft shell around a warm and gentle heart. The cat moved now toward the inner cloister, passing under another archway, and into the covered walk that framed the square garden. The snow in the cloister glowed under the sky, touched by starlight, while the stone walkway was dim, lit only by the pale reflections that bounced from column to column. The cat walked the cloister in a full, unbroken circle, following the same path every night. Its paws left faint tracks on the thin dust that coated the stones, only to be brushed away by the next breeze or the lightest touch of its own tail. As it passed each side of the square, the cat glanced into the garden. There, the bare tree stood like a dark sketch against the snow, its branches reaching upward as if in a quiet, endless prayer. The old herb beds lay sleeping beneath their white covers, holding memories of summer scents. Lavender and thyme, mint and sage, soft green leaves warmed by a gentle sun. The cat seemed to remember those days in some deep, wordless way, a trace of warmth in the stones under its paws, a ghost of fragrance in the cold air. It blinked slowly, peacefully, and continued its round, its presence like a soft thread weaving through the stillness. From the cloister, an open doorway led to a small side hall with windows that looked out toward a distant band of forest lower on the mountain. The trees there were dark and thick, their branches heavy with snow, their trunks standing in quiet ranks like patient guardians of their own hidden world. Sometimes a cold wind would rise from that direction, carrying with it the fresh, clean scent of pine and the faint, dry whisper of needles brushing against one another. When this happened, the cat would sit on the windowsill, nose close to the glass, eyes half closed, as though listening to a far-off lullaby. The forest, too, was part of what it watched over. The abbey and the mountain and the woods and the stars all belonged to one gentle, continuous dream. The cat's rounds took it next to the old kitchen, where long, cold hearths yawned in the dimness, and iron pots hung motionless from blackened hooks. The stones here held a different kind of memory. Heat, laughter, the clatter of wooden spoons, the soft murmur of voices telling simple stories while bread baked and soup simmered. The cat moved softly along the floor, weaving between the legs of empty tables, pausing at the threshold of the hearth as if feeling for lingering warmth. There was none now, but the memory of warmth seemed to float in the air like a faded scent, gentle and comforting. The cat rubbed its cheek against the corner of a table leg, marking the place anew with its own quiet presence, as if to say that the kitchen, too, was not forgotten. From the kitchen, a stairway rose in a gentle curve, its steps worn smooth and shallow by the passage of many feet long ago. The cat climbed them without haste, its tail moving in a slow arc for balance. At the top, another corridor stretched out, this one narrower, lined with niches where simple carved figures once stood. Some were still there, their faces softened by time and shadow. Others had empty spaces where shapes had been. The cat walked this hall in careful silence, pausing now and then to look up into one of the niches, as if greeting an old, patient friend. The figures stared back with calm, stone eyes, their features bathed in a pale wash of moonlight that fell through a distant window. In this quiet gallery, time seemed to hold its breath. Everywhere it went, the cat's presence tied the Abbey's spaces together. The corridors and rooms were no longer just empty places waiting for footsteps that never came. They were part of a pattern, and the pattern was the cat's nightly journey. Each doorway passed, each corner glanced into, each window checked for snow or frost, or the faint glow of distant lights in the valley. These small, steady acts of attention turned the Abbey from an abandoned shell into a living, peaceful home. The cat did not know that the villagers below imagined the place empty. It only knew that there were things here to care for, echoes to keep, silence to watch, memories to cradle gently so they would not dissolve. As the night moved on, the moon shifted slowly across the sky, and the light in the Abbey changed with it. Silver beams slid along floors, climbed walls, and withdrew, leaving shadows soft and deep behind them. The cat followed its route to the last familiar turn, reaching a small landing where a simple wooden bench stood beneath a window. It leapt up and settled there, curling its body into a neat circle, tail wrapped close, front paws tucked under its chest. From this spot, it could see both the corridor behind and the white slope of the mountain outside. The stars shone down with quiet patience. The snow lay soft and peaceful. The wind moved in gentle, sighing breaths. For a long while, the black cat simply waited there, eyes half closed, ears relaxed. It was not sleep, not yet rather. It was a soft, drifting rest, like a boat floating on a still lake. The Abbey around it was calm and quiet and safe. The corridors had been walked, the doors had been visited, the windows had been watched. The memories tucked into stone and wood and snow were once again acknowledged, once again gently held. This was the meaning of its moonlit rounds, not to fight off danger, not to guard against fear, but to keep the Abbey from slipping too far into forgetfulness, to keep a gentle light burning in a place that might otherwise fade into the dark. And so, as the night deepened and the world above and below sank into more peaceful dreams, the black cat rested, the silent keeper of a silent home, its small, steady heartbeat echoing faintly in the quiet, like the softest, most distant bell. On certain nights, when the moon seemed to lean closer to the mountain and the snow outside shone with a pale, tender glow, the abbey itself appeared to breathe a little more deeply. The stone felt softer to the eye, the shadows less sharp, the windows like quiet pools of silver glass. On such a night, the black cat rose from its place on the wooden bench and turned toward the heart of the abbey, where the chapel waited in its calm, unbroken stillness. The path there was familiar, worn into the cat's memory as deeply as the boot marks and sandal prints were worn into the steps themselves. It moved slowly along the corridor, as if already sensing the change in the air ahead, the faint echo of incense, the delicate hush of a room that had once held many wishes and now held only one soft, continuous silence. The door to the chapel stood half open, as it always did now. Once, it might have been closed each night, opened in the morning to let in the soft murmur of prayer and the subdued shuffle of simple shoes. Now, the door rested in a gentle in-between, neither fully shut nor fully ajar, like a thought that had never quite finished leaving or returning. The cat slipped through the gap without touching the wood, its black fur brushing only the air. Inside, the light deepened and changed. The corridor's cold, pale glow gave way to a softer, denser darkness, touched here and there by narrow falls of moonlight that poured through stained glass windows high in the chapel walls. It was like stepping from snow into water, from open air into a still, sheltered pool of quiet. The chapel was small, but it felt large in a different way, the way a quiet thought can feel larger than a loud room. Stone walls rose in simple, clean lines, arching overhead to cradle a ceiling that disappeared into soft shadow. Along the sides, wooden benches sat in neat, unmoving rows, their surfaces smoothed by years of hands resting, bodies leaning, heads bowing in silent reflection. The floor, worn by many knees and many feet, carried faint patterns of use. A slightly darker strip along the center aisle, shallow hollows where countless footsteps had paused before turning away. At the far end, beneath a simple cross and a narrow window, stood the altar, a plain slab of stone dressed now only in dust and the memory of cloth. No candles burned upon it, no flowers freshened its surface, yet the air around it held a subtle warmth, as if the soft residue of so many whispered prayers still gently touched the stone. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass in tall, slender panels. The colors were muted by night, dulled from bright reds and blues and golds to softer, dreamlike shades. A figure that by day might have shown a saint's patient face now appeared only as a blur of pale and darker glass, like a memory half faded. Yet the light that passed through was still beautiful, still gentle. It fell in quiet pools upon the floor and the benches, turning dust into drifting, silver-tinted specks that moved as slowly as snowflakes in a windless sky. The cat's eyes followed these tiny dances as it walked down the central aisle, its paws making no sound on the stone. Each step seemed to echo, not in noise but in feeling, stirring faint impressions of voices, of breath, of stillness shared by many hearts. The cat paused midway down the chapel, beside a bench where the wood had been polished by countless hands resting along its edge. It leapt lightly up, settling on the smooth surface with the ease of long habit, and sat looking toward the altar. From here, its golden eyes could take in the whole simple space. The worn steps leading up to the stone, the empty candle stands flanking it on either side, the slight irregularities in the floor where time had pressed its thumb. It was a view that once had belonged to monks and visitors, to villagers who climbed the mountain with quiet hopes folded into their pockets and their palms. Now the cat held that view, calm and steady, as if standing in for all those who could no longer be there. In its stillness, there was a kind of gentle reverence, wordless and soft. The empty candle stands drew the eye, their metal darkened and dulled, yet still slender and graceful. Each little holder had once cradled a small flame that flickered and bent in the drafts of winter nights and summer evenings, lighting faces lined with worry or smoothed with peace. Now, there were only traces, a ring of old wax at the base, a faint shadow on the stone where heat had once touched. The cat lifted its head slightly, as though it could still feel the warmth of those absent flames. In the quiet, the chapel seemed to remember the soft glow of candlelight. It was as if the darkness itself had been shaped by years of gentle illumination and had learned to be kind, to be restful, to be a place where shadows did not threaten but simply wrapped themselves around tired thoughts and eased them into stillness. The cat dropped from the bench and moved closer to the altar, its tail low and relaxed, its steps slow. It climbed the shallow, worn steps in 2 small bounds, then sat in front of the stone slab, looking up at it with an expression that, in a human face, might have been called contemplative. Above the altar, the narrow window let in a bright shaft of moonlight, paler and cleaner than the stained glass colors. It fell straight down, marking the stone with a single stripe of silver that divided the altar into a light half and a shadowed half. The cat shifted until its paws rested partly in that light, as if drawn to its gentle clarity. The cold of the stone rose through its pads, but the soft brightness of the moon felt like a thin blanket spread across its fur, a quiet blessing that needed no words. In the deeper corners of the chapel, where the light did not reach, the air thickened into a calm darkness. Here, memory gathered like mist. The cat, sensitive to every nuance of the abbey, turned its head toward these shadows without any sense of unease. There was no fear in this place, no sharpness, no hidden threat, only the lingering presence of wishes that had been whispered and then set down, like folded paper boats released onto a slow stream. Some had been hopes for healing, some for forgiveness, some simply for rest. Those wishes no longer had voices, but the feeling of them remained, suspended in the quiet air, settling gently into the stone, where they became part of the abbey's deep, peaceful heart. A faint draft slipped under the chapel door and moved along the floor like a slow, invisible tide. It carried with it the scent of snow and cold stone, but also something softer, the distant trace of pine from the forest, the clean, neutral smell of untouched air. As this gentle breath of wind passed the altar, it touched the dust on its surface, stirring the particles into a tiny, glimmering swirl in the path of the moonbeam. The cat watched, eyes wide and reflective, as the dust rose and fell again in a soft, silver sigh. It seemed, for a brief moment, as if a ghost of candle smoke had risen there, as if one single wick had remembered how it once burned and had sent up a final, delicate thread to greet the night. At length, the cat moved away from the altar and wandered to the side of the chapel, where a narrow row of wooden prayer stools knelt before a low ledge in the wall. Their cushions, once filled with straw or wool, had grown thin and flat, and their fabric had faded to pale, quiet colors. The cat stepped up onto one of them, then onto the ledge itself, and from there onto the sill of a small window that looked directly out into the night. Here the glass was clear, uncolored, and the world beyond it appeared in gentle shades of blue and white and silver. The mountain slope, the snow, the dark line of distant trees, the calm sky dusted with stars, all lay spread out in a silent embrace. The cat curled on the sill, tucking its paws beneath its chest, and rested its head near the glass, as if listening to the frozen world outside and the soft, remembering hush within. In this place, between interior and exterior, between stone and sky, the chapel's character seemed most complete. The quiet inside met the quiet outside, and the cat, poised exactly at their boundary, became a small, breathing bridge between them. Behind it, the altar and benches held the weight of long years and countless human hearts. Before it, the snow and stars held the vast, simple calm of the night. The cat closed its eyes halfway, then fully, its body relaxing into a loose, easy curve. It did not sleep deeply, but drifted in a light, peaceful doze, ears still faintly attuned to the gentle creaks of the building, the distant sigh of the wind, the soft, patient heartbeat of the abbey itself. Time in the chapel moved without haste. The moon shifted slowly in the sky, and the stripes of light from the windows shifted with it, sliding along stone and wood in a quiet, graceful dance. Shadows gathered in one corner and thinned in another, but the sense of stillness never broke. Eventually, the cat opened its eyes again and lifted its head, as if answering a call too soft to name. It rose, stretched along the narrow sill, and jumped back down to the floor, paws landing with the lightest touch. For a moment it glanced once more toward the altar, toward the empty candle stands and the soft path of moonlight, as though offering its own small, silent prayer on behalf of those who were no longer here to kneel. Then, with the same slow, measured grace with which it had entered, the black cat walked back down the aisle, past the worn benches and the prayer stools, past the doorway where the draft still whispered, it slipped through the half-open door and into the corridor again, leaving the chapel to its gentle, silvered dark. Yet the chapel was not empty. The echo of soft paws remained in the stone. The memory of golden eyes remained in the shadows. The presence of a quiet, watchful heart lingered in the air, like the afterglow of a candle that has just been blown out, like the last soft ring of a bell fading into the night. The cat carried the chapel with it as it moved on, and the chapel, in its own soft way, continued to hold the cat and all the peaceful memories it guarded in its silent, enduring embrace. When the cat left the chapel, the corridor outside felt a little different, as if it had borrowed some of the room's stillness and carried it into the stone. The air was cool and faintly scented with old incense and dust, and the moonlight that slipped in through the high windows seemed softer now, touched with a quiet, silvery calm. The black cat moved along the passage with unhurried steps, its body low and relaxed, its tail drawing a slow, gentle line behind it. It knew where it was going next, for its nightly path was as constant as the path of the moon across the sky. Beyond a narrow arch, down a short flight of steps, and along a lesser-used hall, the abbey's heart of paper and ink and memory waited. The library that few eyes had seen for many years, but which the cat visited every single night. The way to the library grew slightly narrower and more enclosed, as though the abbey itself were folding inward, gathering around something precious. The walls here held shelves set into the stone, empty now, or filled only with a scattering of forgotten things. A chipped mug, a small wooden box, a bundle of brittle herbs tied with faded string. The cat passed them all without pausing, yet its whiskers twitched faintly at the scents ghosts of tea leaves, shadows of lavender, the dry whisper of old binding glue. At the end of the hall, a tall wooden door waited, its surface scarred by age and use, its iron latch dark and still. The door stood partly open, just enough for a sliver of pale light to spill out into the corridor, a quiet invitation that the cat answered every night with the same silent acceptance. The black cat slipped through the opening and into the library, and the world seemed to grow larger and quieter all at once. The room was long and high-ceilinged, with shelves climbing the walls like the trunks of some strange wooden forest. Rows of bookcases filled the center, forming narrow lanes that invited slow wandering. The air held a gentle, settled chill, but it was not unfriendly. It was the coolness of paper and stone resting together, of ink dried long ago yet still patient and ready. Thin shafts of moonlight fell from windows near the ceiling, cutting through the dimness to land in pale, soft rectangles across the floor and the edges of tables. Dust drifted in those beams, turning each column of light into a slow, shimmering river of tiny, floating stars. The books themselves seemed to breathe in the quiet, their leather spines, some cracked and flaking, others still smooth and soft, stood in close ranks, shoulder to shoulder, as if huddled together against the cold. Some were small and slim, others thick and weighty, their pages edged in faded gold or rough, uneven cuts. There were volumes of songs and prayers, books of stories and parables, collections of herbal recipes, simple notes on the weather of long-vanished winters and springs. Each book held a world inside it, pressed between its covers like a flower kept safe from time. No hands turned their pages now, but the words remained, waiting patiently in the dark, like gentle thoughts that had not yet finished their journey. The cat walked slowly between the shelves, the pads of its paws making the faintest whisper against the floor. It knew every path through this forest of books, every narrow passage where the shelves leaned a little closer, as though sharing secrets with each other. Its tail brushed lightly against the lower edges, stirring a small puff of dust here, a tiny shift of dry air there. To any watching eye, it was only a cat wandering through an old room. But within the abbey, where memory and place and time had grown soft and interwoven, the movement of the cat felt like the turning of a page. As it passed, something in the silence seemed to awaken, not loudly, not sharply, but gently, as if remembering how to hum a melody long forgotten. In the center of the library stood a broad wooden table, its surface scarred with ink stains and faint knife marks where quills had been cut and trimmed. The moonlight from a higher window fell directly upon it, laying a wide square of silvered light across the wood. A few loose sheets of parchment lay scattered there, their edges curled and their writing faded to a pale, soft brown. Beside them rested a single, closed book, thicker than the rest, with a dark cover that had cracked along the spine. The cat leapt lightly up onto the table, landing in the edge of the moonlit patch, and turned in a slow circle before settling with its body, partly in the light, partly in the shadow. It tucked its paws beneath its chest and lowered itself into a comfortable, watchful rest, eyes half open, ears attuned to the quiet. From this place, the cat could see much of the library at once. It could see the tall shelves fading into shadow at each end of the room, the ladders leaning against them at gentle angles. The dust gathered on the top edges like a thin layer of snow. It could see the way the moonlight traced the edges of each book, turning them into a pattern of silver-touched spines and darker gaps. It could see the soft gleam of the floor where the light fell clear, and the deeper, richer darkness in the corners where the shadows pooled. To a human gaze, the library might have seemed lonely. To the cat, it was full of quiet presence, full of stories sleeping softly, full of thoughts that had been laid down like seeds and left to rest. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the wind outside smoothed itself into a long, gentle breath, and even the tiniest creaks of the abbey grew rare, the library would seem to speak in a very soft way. There was no sound to it, nothing sharp enough to disturb the air, but the cat, with its steady, listening heart, felt it as a kind of murmur beneath its paws, a faint flutter along its whiskers. It was as though the words inside the books remembered that they had once been spoken aloud, once sung or whispered or carefully recited, and now they rose in a quiet, invisible movement, like the slow exhale of someone asleep and dreaming. In those moments, The library felt like a seashell filled with the hush of distant waves, each book contributing a small, soothing note to the vast, gentle chorus. The cat would close its eyes at such times, but its ears would remain slightly pricked, and its body would stay poised, as if part of a calm, patient vigil. It did not understand the letters pressed into the paper, nor the languages in which they had been written. It did not need to. It sensed the care that had gone into forming each line, the presence of hands that had held the quills, the warmth of breath that had dried the ink. It sensed the peaceful concentration of those who had once sat at this very table, heads bent, shoulders relaxed, hearts quiet and devoted. The echo of that quiet devotion still lingered here, wrapped around the shelves and the pages like a soft shawl, and the cat took its place within it as naturally as it lay in a patch of sunlight on a winter morning. At times, a draft would find its way into the library, slipping under the door or breathing through the tiniest crack in the window frame. It would wander between the shelves and across the table, touching the loose parchment so that one corner lifted, then fell again like a page turning in a dream. The cat would watch this with calm curiosity, its eyes following the slow movement. The draft always smelled of something from outside: sharp snow, distant pine, or the faintest hint of the valley below. The smell mingled with the inner sense of the library, the dry sweetness of old paper, the earthy tang of ink and glue, the faint dust of wood. Together, they created an atmosphere that was both rooted and airy, both grounded and drifting, like the feeling of reading a story that carries the mind far away while the body remains warm and still. Once, as the moon slid a little higher and its light shifted along the wall, the beam struck directly upon the old, thick book beside the cat. Its worn cover seemed to glow faintly, the cracks in the leather softening into gentle lines. The cat turned its head and placed one paw lightly on the book's surface, as if acknowledging its presence. Inside those pages, perhaps, were records of days when the abbey had been full, lists of seeds planted in the garden, notes about birds seen on the mountain, small accounts of snowfalls and thaws, and the first flowers of spring. Perhaps, too, there were names written there, carefully formed, belonging to people whose footsteps now existed only as smooth hollows in stone. The cat's paw rested for a moment more, then withdrew. The book remained closed, untouched, yet somehow seen, somehow accompanied. As the night deepened, the library grew even quieter, as if sinking into its own gentle slumber. The cat's body relaxed more fully on the table. Its eyes, which had watched the dust and the slow shifting of light, drifted closed at last. Still, inside the room, something stayed awake. The shelves held their ranks. The books held their stories. The moonlight, entering by narrow paths, laid its silver fingertips on cover after cover, as though blessing them. The air remained tender, peaceful, neither too cold nor too still. Everything seemed to rest, but nothing felt abandoned. The library, like the chapel and the cloister and the paths outside, was held within the quiet circle of the cat's nightly watch. When the time came for the cat to move on, drawn by a feeling that its rounds were not yet complete, it rose slowly, with the careful grace of something unwilling to disturb the calm it had helped deepen. It stretched in a long, soft arc, claws briefly touching the wood of the table, then stepped lightly down to the floor. Before leaving, it paused at the threshold and turned its head back, golden eyes shining faintly in the dimness. It gave the room one last, calm look, as if to be sure that the books were settled, that the shadows were gentle, that the whispering pages were at peace. Then it slipped through the door and back into the corridor, leaving the library to its delicate dreams, while carrying with it, once again, the soft, steady memory of all the words it had silently watched over in the silvered night. When the cat left the library, the corridor welcomed it back with a familiar hush, as if the shelves of sleeping books had poured a little extra quiet into the stone. The air felt slightly cooler here, and a very faint draft moved along the floor, slipping around the cat's paws like a slow, invisible stream. Somewhere above, beyond layers of stone and shadow, the highest part of the abbey waited the bell tower, where the walls opened to the sky and the night wind moved more freely. The cat paused for a moment, as if listening to something distant and gentle, calling down from above, then turned toward the narrow passage that led to the tower stairs. Its steps were unhurried, soft, and sure, as it followed the path its paws had traced countless times, night after night, season after season, in a rhythm as natural as breathing. The stairway to the tower was tucked behind a plain wooden door near the end of a side hall. The door, like so many others in the abbey, no longer closed completely. Its latch had grown loose, and a small gap remained where light and air could pass through. The cat nudged it open with the lightest touch of its head and slipped into the stairwell. Inside, the air changed at once. It felt cooler, thinner, lightly threaded with the scent of old stone, dry dust, and something else, a crisp, high note of snow and sky that did not belong to the lower corridors. The staircase curved upward along the inside of a round wall, each step worn smooth and shallow at the center. The cat began to climb, tail balanced in a soft arc, paws touching each stone with careful, soundless grace. As it spiraled upward, the world below fell away, layer by gentle layer. The sounds of the abbey's small creaks, faint sighs, the distant shifting of beams in the night grew softer, until they were only a suggestion, a half-remembered murmur beneath the cat's paws. Narrow slits in the wall, set at intervals along the stair, allowed thin fingers of moonlight to reach inside. Each time the cat passed one, a patch of silver fell across its fur, tracing the slope of its back and the curve of its head. Outside, the mountain pressed close to the stone, but the sky beyond the slits looked wide and deep, a quiet ocean of indigo sprinkled with steady, patient stars. The wind sometimes slipped through these narrow openings, brushing past the cat's whiskers in a cool, gentle caress, carrying with it a breath of the night that awaited at the top. Higher and higher the cat climbed, in no hurry and with no strain, its small body completely at ease with this nightly journey. The spiral of steps became a soft, repeating rhythm. 1, 2, 3. A pause to listen. Then 1, 2, 3 again. The stone beneath its paws was cold but familiar, like the touch of an old friend's hand. As it moved, the scent of the outside world grew clearer, mingling with the quiet smell of the tower's interior. There was the sharp purity of snow, the faint, resinous whisper of distant pines, the barely there scent of the valley's smoke and life rising in thin threads far below. All of it blended into a simple, soothing note that spoke of openness, of distance, of gentle, endless space. At last, the steps came to an end, opening onto a small, circular chamber just beneath the roof of the tower. The ceiling here was higher, the walls pierced by larger openings that looked out in every direction. Beyond them, the sky lay close and vast, and the night wind moved more freely, entering and leaving with a soft, constant motion. In the center of the chamber hung the bell. It was large, but not enormous, suspended from a sturdy wooden beam that had darkened with age. The metal surface was dulled by years of weather and time, but in the moonlight, it still held a quiet sheen, as if a thin layer of silver had settled over it. The bell's mouth was broad and shadowed, and inside, its tongue hung motionless, as if at rest in a long, peaceful sleep. The cat stepped into the tower room and sat for a moment at the edge of the top step, letting the wind ruffle the short fur along its spine. The air was colder here than anywhere else in the abbey, but it was a clean, open, cold, full of breath and space. It did not sting. It did not bite. It simply touched everything lightly: the cat's whiskers, the bell's rim, the stone floor, and then moved on, carrying with it a feeling of softness and freedom. The cat rose and walked toward the bell, weaving through a band of moonlight that spilled down from a break in the clouds. Its black fur glowed faintly where the light touched it, a soft contrast against the pale stone and the silver darkness beyond the arches. Near the bell, the cat paused and lifted its head, looking up at the heavy, silent shape above. The bell did not ring now, did not swing or tremble, yet it held, within its stillness, the memory of all the times it had once spoken. Across years and seasons, it had called monks to prayer in the cold gray of morning, marked the gentle closing of the day at dusk, and sometimes told in the deep of night, never harshly, never hurriedly, but with a clear, slow voice that carried down the mountain like a blessing. Those tones had long faded into the past, but the mountain remembered them, and so did the abbey, and so, in its own wordless way, did the cat. It sat very still beneath the bell, eyes half closed, as if listening to something that could not be heard with ears, only felt with the heart. The wind circled the tower in soft, spiraling currents, slipping in through one arch and out another, lifting tiny flakes of snow from the ledges and carrying them briefly into the air. They glimmered as they turned, catching starlight and moonlight in flashes of silver, then settled again on stone and wood and fur. The cat watched them with calm attention, following their slow, floating paths. The movement of the snow was gentle, almost sleepy, like drifting thoughts at the edge of a dream. The night felt wide and peaceful here, as though the whole world were wrapped in a shared, quiet blanket. Mountain, valley, abbey, and sky, all breathing together in long, easy sighs. From one of the open arches, the valley could be seen far below, a soft darkness scattered with tiny points of light where the village homes nestled close together. The cat moved toward that opening and placed its front paws on the low stone lip, stretching its body just enough to see. The wind pressed gently against its face and ears, carrying the faintest hints of smoke and pine, the soft, distant murmur of a river running beneath ice. The lights below flickered quietly, steady and small, like a handful of fallen stars resting on the earth. The cat gazed down at them for a long moment, eyes calm and thoughtful. It seemed, in that gaze, to be counting each one, acknowledging each small fire, each dreaming household, each sleeping heart under its own patch of roof and sky. Behind the cat, the bell remained still, yet every so often, when the wind turned in just the right way, or when the front of a cloud brushed past the tower and then moved on, the smallest tremor ran through the air. It was not truly a sound, more a suggestion, a gentle reminder. The metal of the bell would quiver almost imperceptibly, and a very faint vibration would drift down through the beam and into the stone. If one had been standing very close, with a hand resting upon the tower wall, one might have imagined feeling the ghost of a tone, the softest, most delicate echo of a chime. To the cat, sitting there in the wind's slow embrace, it felt like the tower's heartbeat, a peaceful, silver whisper that said, "I am still here. I am still awake." Sometimes, on nights when the sky was unusually clear and the stars shone like a river of quiet fire across the darkness, the bell gave more than a tremor. Without swinging, without any visible movement, it would release a single, soft note into the air. It was never loud, never sharp. It sounded like the sigh of a faraway shore, or the ring of a glass touched only once and then left to fade. The note slipped out over the snow and down the mountain, too gentle to be heard in the valley as a sound, yet somehow felt there as a sudden, unexplained calm. Within the abbey, the tone brushed along the walls, down the stairwell, through the corridors and rooms where dust lay on benches and sunlight visited only in brief, pale beams. The cat would listen with its eyes closed, whiskers tilted forward, body perfectly still, as if receiving a blessing it had come to know well. After such a note, the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt full and serene, like a deep silver pool after a single, widening ripple has smoothed itself away. The wind, respectful and gentle, seemed to soften around the tower, its touch turning almost tender. The cat breathed slowly, in and out, its small chest rising and falling in quiet rhythm with the larger breath of the night. In that shared stillness, the abbey's spirit seemed very near, as if the old building itself were awake and listening, held in a state of peaceful watchfulness that needed no eyes, no hands, no spoken words, only the presence of stone and snow and bell and sky, and one soft-footed guardian who walked its paths. When the cat finally turned away from the view of the valley and the open arches, it came once more to rest near the center of the chamber, beneath the silent bell. It circled once, gently, then lay down with its body curved into a relaxed crescent, tail tucked almost but not quite to its nose. The wind moved past, slow and constant, like the turning of pages in a book filled with nothing but blank, soothing sheets. Above, the bell hung motionless, yet its quiet presence filled the space like a soft song that never quite ended. The stars wheeled on overhead. The snow settled and resettled on the ledges. The valley lights glimmered like sleepy eyes below. In this way, the bell tower became the high, echoing heart of the abbey's night. It did not ring out loudly as it once had, but its very being kept something awake within the old stone walls, a memory, a feeling, a gentle awareness that the abbey was not forgotten, not vanished, not truly alone. The cat, resting there at the bell's feet, was part of that awareness. Together, the quiet bell and the quiet cat listened to the night wind and watched the slow drifting of snow, holding the abbey's spirit in a soft, silver cradle of attention. And when at last the cat would rise to descend the stairs again, the tower would remain behind like a dream, still shining faintly in the dark, waiting patiently for the next night's watch, the next soft note, the next peaceful meeting of stone and wind and stars. On the night when everything quietly began to change, the mountain seemed even more peaceful than usual. The sky was very clear, a deep velvet blue that let every star shine in its fullest, softest brightness. The moon hung above the ridge like a patient lantern, large and calm, casting a silver glow over the snow that lay deep and still on every slope. The abbey rested within this pale light, its roofs and walls softened by white, its windows dark and reflective, its courtyards filled with quiet. The wind moved gently around the stones, not in sharp gusts, but in slow, rounded breaths, as if the mountain itself were sleeping and dreaming a long, peaceful dream. The black cat had returned from the bell tower and now moved with unhurried steps through the corridors once more, its small heart beating in steady time with the breath of the night. Inside the abbey, the air was cool and pure. It carried a delicate mixture of scents: old wood, cold stone, faint dust from unused rooms, and the distant memory of herbs that slept now under snow. The cat walked the familiar paths past the tall windows of the main hall, past the half-open door of the chapel, past the quiet arch that led back toward the library, its presence drawing an invisible thread of gentle attention through the building. There was nothing new, nothing out of place, nothing disturbed. Everything lay where it had lain for so long, like objects carefully arranged on a shelf in the soft light of a dream. Yet, as the cat paused beside one of the narrow windows that faced the downward slope of the mountain, something in the air beyond the glass caught its notice. Outside, The snow glowed softly beneath the moon, an unbroken expanse of white that stretched from the abbey walls down into the shadows of rocks and pines. Most nights, the surface of that snow remained smooth for days, touched only by the tracks of birds or a fox passing silently at the edge of the forest, or the faint print of the cat's own paws near the cloister. Tonight, as the cat gazed down, its golden eyes sharpened and stilled, it saw a line where the smoothness had been gently disturbed. Far below, near the place where the narrow mountain path emerged from the shelter of a few wind-bent trees, there were markings in the snow, small, uneven depressions that caught the moonlight just enough to show their shape. They were footsteps, human footsteps, leading upward. The prints were not bold, not deep and confident, but light and hesitant. Each one seemed to pause slightly before the next began, as though the person who made them had walked with careful, uncertain steps. In places, the wind had already begun to blur their edges, smoothing and softening them, trying to fold them back into the general whiteness of the slope. Even so, the line of prints remained visible, tracing a delicate, wandering path toward the abbey. The cat watched them for a long moment, head tilted, ears relaxed but attentive. It could not see the traveler yet, for they were still hidden among the dim shapes of rocks and trees further down. But the presence of the footprints, gentle and alone in the wide field of snow, told the cat that someone was coming, someone small against the great, quiet mountain, someone who had left the safer roads of the valley and followed a higher, more silent calling. The cat shifted its weight and leaned a little closer to the glass, its breath making a faint cloud on the cold surface. It listened, though no sound could travel that far clearly. The night carried only soft impressions. The whisper of the wind in the pines, the distant murmur of the buried river, the hush of falling snow where patches of sky had begun to pale with a new drift of cloud. Yet, beneath these gentle sounds, there was a feeling, a subtle change in the quiet, as though another heartbeat had joined the mountain's calm rhythm. Somewhere below, a pair of tired feet moved through the snow, slow and steady, guided by more than sight. The cat's whiskers trembled with a sense of awareness, and its tail gave a small, thoughtful curve. The abbey, the mountain, and the traveler were all beginning to share the same quiet breath. High above, in the bell tower, the great silent bell hung in its usual stillness, but the air around it had grown finely attentive. The night wind that brushed past its rim carried a new story now, the story of a gentle soul making their way upward through the cold. Though the bell did not swing, something within the metal seemed to respond, like a chord resonating faintly in answer to a distant note. The mountain knew the weight of this movement upon its side. The old path, almost forgotten, knew the feeling of steps upon it once more. Even the snow, soft and deep and usually untouched, seemed to cradle each footprint with care, pressing around it in a quiet, protective ring. All this, the cat sensed in a wordless, peaceful way, as if the walls around it murmured a soft welcome in a language without sound. Leaving the window, the black cat made its way toward the great door at the front of the abbey, though it did not hurry. There was time yet. The footsteps were still far below, each small depression in the snow taking shape slowly as the traveler drew nearer. The mountain did not rush, and neither did the cat. Still, some gentle instinct urged it along the corridor, past the refectory and the side hall, until at last it came to the wide, shadowed space where the main door stood. Snow had gathered thickly along the threshold outside, pressed up against the heavy wood like a soft, white cushion. Inside, in the entry hall, the air held a stillness that felt expectant, as if the stone itself were waiting for something to happen, some quiet change, some new presence to step across its surface. The cat sat down a short distance from the door, its gaze lifted toward the small window set high above it. Through that little square of glass, the sky could be seen a sliver of deep blue, sprinkled with stars, edged by the dark outline of the mountain's ridge. The cat's ears turned slightly as it listened once more, not for a knock or a call, which would come much later if at all, but for the subtle approach of warmth moving through cold. It imagined, in its own simple, tender way, the traveler's breath puffing in small clouds before their face, their hands tucked into sleeves, their steps careful but persistent. It imagined the soft creak of leather, the faint rustle of cloth, the muffled crunch of boots pressing into snow. These sounds were distant yet, too small to cross the space between valley and abbey as anything more than ideas. But the cat held those ideas with the same care it gave to memories of candles and songs and turning pages. Outside, the traveler continued to climb. They were tired, but not afraid. The mountain was vast, and the night was cold, yet there was a peace in the air that wrapped around them like a trusted cloak. The moonlight made the snow glow softly beneath their feet, and the sky above seemed close, almost protective. More than once, they paused and looked up toward the ridge where they knew the abbey lay, though they could not yet see its shape clearly against the stone. In those pauses, the quiet of the world pressed gently into their heart, and somewhere within that silence, they thought they heard or felt a note so soft it might have been imagined like the faint echo of a bell. It was not a loud call, not a command, only a gentle suggestion, a silver thread of sound that seemed to say, "This way, come this way. There is a warm stillness waiting for you." The mountain listened as the traveler's footprints traced their path upward, and the snow received each step with patient care. No storm rose against them, no sharp wind tried to turn them back. The trees along the path stood quietly, branches bending under their white burdens, and let the traveler pass without protest, their needles whispering only the softest, most neutral lullaby. The stars observed from their great, serene distance, and if they shone a little more brightly above the abbey, no one remarked upon it. In this gentle, unhurried fashion, the valley and the mountain and the sky themselves seemed to guide the traveler, not with signs and signals, but with a shared, peaceful openness that allowed their small, determined figure to move steadily upward, step by soft step, toward the silent stone that waited above. Inside the abbey, the cat rose again and moved once more toward a window, needing to see how close the footprints had come. It jumped lightly onto a sill, placed its paws carefully on the cold surface, and peered out. The line of tracks was nearer now, clearly visible as a slender, winding chain of small, pale shadows in the snow. Where the path grew steep, the prints pressed a little deeper, but they did not falter. The cat blinked slowly, its eyes full of a calm, golden focus. It felt no alarm, only a deep, very gentle concern, like the feeling one might have watching a weary bird approaching refuge after a long flight. The abbey was still, but no longer only for itself. Its quiet was beginning to open, like a door half ajar, ready to receive another soft, living presence into its peaceful dream. As the night gently unfolded, the distance between the traveler and the abbey continued to shrink, not with drama or urgency, but with slow, steady grace. The bell remained silent, the wind remained kind, the stars remained bright, and the black cat, soft guardian of stone and snow and memory, kept its patient watch, sensing in the rhythm of the traveler's approaching footsteps the promise of a new story that would soon join the older ones, resting in chapel and library and cloister. The mountain held its breath only in the gentlest way, as though pausing in its long, slumbering thoughts to make a little extra room for a tired heart climbing through the quiet, silver night toward a place of deep and peaceful rest. By the time the traveler reached the last turn in the mountain path, the night had grown even more tender. The wind had slowed to a soft, continuous sigh, moving over the snow as gently as a hand smoothing a quilt. The stars watched from their high, steady places, and the moon poured her silver light down the slope as if trying to lighten each remaining step. The traveler's legs were heavy, their breath coming in slow, misted clouds, but there was a quiet steadiness in their movements, a kind of trust that the path, though cold and lonely, was leading somewhere meant to receive them. Each footfall pressed into the snow with a hushed crunch that quickly disappeared under the soft hush of new flakes settling from the sky. Above them, the abbey gradually emerged from the darkness, first as a darker shape against the mountain, then as a cluster of pale forms touched with white. The roofs glimmered faintly, softened by deep snow, and the wide front wall rose like a calm, silent face. No lights shone from the windows, no smoke rose from the chimneys. To anyone seeing it for the first time, it might have seemed empty, abandoned, a shell of stone and wood left behind by time. Yet, as the traveler drew nearer, the stillness did not feel forsaking. It felt watchful, peaceful, like the quiet of a room prepared in advance, waiting for a guest who has not yet knocked. Inside, just beyond the great front door, the black cat sat in its chosen place, eyes turned toward the heavy wood, as though it could see straight through it to the snow beyond. The stone beneath its paws was cool and smooth, worn by the passing of countless feet that no longer walked there, and the air in the entry hall held a soft expectancy. The cat's ears twitched once, then stilled again, catching a faint tremor in the world outside, the rhythm of nearing footsteps, the subtle vibration of weight moving over snow and into stone. It rose, stretching its back in a long, graceful curve, and padded closer to the door, its tail drawing a gentle line along the floor. The traveler, at last, stood before the abbey. From this close, the door seemed even larger, its wood darkened by age and weather, its iron bands slightly dulled by the touch of many winters. Snow had drifted up against the lower panels, piled in a quiet, soft curve that almost reached the threshold. For a moment, the traveler simply stood and breathed, feeling their hearts slow as they listened to the sheer depth of the silence. The mountain behind them was vast and quiet. The valley beyond that was far away and hidden. Here, at this single point where hand met wood, the world narrowed to one simple action. They lifted a gloved hand and placed it gently against the door. The wood felt cold, but not unkind. When they pushed, expecting the stubborn resistance of a long-closed entrance, the door gave more easily than anticipated, moving inward with a slow, weighty sigh. The hinges did not shriek. They whispered, as if the door had been opened many times in dreams and remembered how to move. A faint breath of warmer air slipped out to meet the traveler, carrying with it the subtle dry scents of stone, old wood, and a dustiness that somehow did not speak of neglect, but of rest. As the door parted, the travelers saw the entry hall unfold before them, a wide space of stone floor and high, shadowed ceiling, lit only by the pale wash of moonlight from a high window. The light fell in a soft, silver beam, catching the outlines of benches along the walls and the worn pattern of the flagstones beneath. And there, in the gentle path of that light, sat the cat. Its black fur shone faintly, outlined against the pale floor, and its eyes, deep and golden, regarded the traveler with a calm so steady it felt almost like a welcome spoken without sound. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at one another. The weary traveler with snow still clinging to their boots and cloak, and the small, composed guardian of the Silent Abbey. There was no surprise in the cat's gaze, no alarm, only a measured, peaceful recognition, as though it had been expecting this arrival for a very long time. The traveler felt something inside their chest loosen, an invisible knot of tension quietly untying itself. The emptiness of the abbey no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt like a space gently held, gently watched, gently kept warm in ways that did not require fire. The cat rose and took a few steps forward, then paused to look back, as if giving a soft, wordless invitation. Its tail swayed in a slow, graceful curve, and its paws made no sound on the stone. The traveler, guided by something beyond reason or habit, stepped fully inside and pulled the door closed behind them. The wood settled back into its frame with a muted thud, and the deep quiet of the abbey wrapped around them like a cloak. No lamps were lit, yet the moonlight from the high window and the faint reflection from the snow outside gave the hall a soft, silvery visibility, enough to see the cat's path and follow. They walked together down the corridor, the cat a small, dark shape ahead, leading with steady confidence. The traveler's steps echoed faintly, blending with the long, sleeping resonance of the stone. Their breath slowed further, matching the calm pace of the cat. Here and there, the traveler glimpsed details along the walls. A simple wooden cross, a niche where a carved figure had once stood, a worn bench whose surface shone from long ago use. Each small detail seemed softened by time, but not erased, as if every object had been allowed to rest without being forgotten. The cat led the traveler past the main hall and the entrance to the cloister, where a faint, pale glow hinted at snow beyond the arches, then turned into a side passage where the ceiling dipped lower and the walls closed in a little, making the space feel sheltered and snug. The air here was slightly warmer, though there was no visible fire. It carried the softer scent of wool and dried herbs, of linen stored neatly away, of a place meant for human rest. At the end of this passage, a door stood half open, revealing the shadowed outline of a small room within. The cat slipped through first, then turned, waiting. Inside, the room was modest but welcoming. A narrow bed waited against one wall, covered with clean, simple blankets in pale, restful colors. A small table stood near the bed, and on it, as if the abbey had known this moment would come, rested a clay pitcher and a basin, with a folded cloth beside them. In one corner, a low chair sat near a stone hearth. The fireplace held only a bed of old ashes. Yet, as the traveler stepped into the room, the sense of cold seemed to ease, replaced by a quiet, inner warmth that had nothing to do with flames. It felt like the warmth of a place that had been prepared not in haste, but in patient, gentle expectation. The travelers set down their small pack and removed their snow-dusted cloak, laying it carefully over the back of the chair. Their fingers, stiff from the cold, moved more easily now, as though the air itself were loosening them. They poured water from the pitcher into the basin. It was cool, but not icy, and when they splashed it over their face and hands, the sensation was refreshing rather than biting. Droplets fell back into the basin with the softest of sounds, like tiny bells far away in a fog. All the while, the cat watched from the foot of the bed, its eyes half closed, its body relaxed yet attentive, as if making sure that the traveler settled without unease. At last, with the simple tasks done, the traveler sank down onto the bed. The mattress, though thin, was comfortable, and the blankets felt surprisingly soft and warm against their tired limbs. They lay back slowly, staring up at the low ceiling, where shadows moved and shifted in gentle patterns, shaped by the moonlight filtering through a small, high window. The cat leapt lightly onto the bed and curled itself near their feet, a compact, warm presence that seemed to anchor the room in a deeper stillness. Outside, the wind whispered along the walls, but its voice was muted now, as though out of respect for the new, fragile peace that had settled over the guest. Somewhere high above, in the shadowed tower, the bell gave the faintest tremor. Not a full note, not a cry, only a soft, silver shiver that ran through the stone like a blessing. The traveler did not hear it with their ears, but felt it as a gentle easing of the last traces of worry from their mind. Their breathing grew slow and even. Their eyelids grew heavy. The abbey's quiet, the mountain's calm, the soft presence of the black cat at their feet, all these layered together into a protective hush, cradling them the way snow cradles the sleeping earth. As sleep reached for them, they thought, for a brief and drifting instant, that they saw movement beyond the doorway, an impression of robed figures passing by in peaceful silence, a hint of candlelight turned to silver by the moon. But the impression faded before they could grasp it, and they did not feel the need to chase it. It was enough to know that they were not truly alone, that something kind and ancient and gentle lived in these walls and watched over their rest. The cat opened its eyes once more, gazed at the sleeping face with quiet satisfaction, then closed its eyes again, its small body relaxing completely. The night deepened around them, soft and silver and quiet. Snow continued to fall outside, layering the world in deeper peace. The abbey held its guest with the care of a long-forgotten host, remembering perfectly how to welcome, and the black cat, guardian of corridors and chapel and tower and door, kept its silent vigil, letting the old stones and the soft bells of memory do the rest. In this way, the Silent Abbey received its new, gentle presence, not with fanfare or voice, but with warm blankets, cool water, and a sleeping room where dreams could drift in softly and rest in deep, untroubled peace. Banda Noi. Continue writing the next part. Remember to strictly follow the plot and table of contents. Each part should be about 1,000 words. Write this story in calm, soothing style, ensuring it reads like the work of a skilled writer in a traditional novel format. Maintain a smooth and flowing narrative, avoiding excessive paragraph breaks. Express ideas in well-structured paragraphs, each containing multiple related descriptive sentences. Use detailed descriptions and seamless transitions to connect ideas effectively. Maintain a steady narrative pace, avoiding overly short or disjointed sections. Ensure cohesion between paragraphs, creating a continuous and immersive reading experience akin to a traditional literary novel. Maintain fluency and smoothness throughout. The traveler slept deeply, as if the mountain itself had laid a soft hand over their eyes and whispered them into rest. For a long time, they did not stir. The quiet of the abbey wrapped around them like layered blankets, and their dreams, if they had any, were gentle and pale, drifting like slow flakes of snow. When at last they began to wake, it was not because of any harsh sound or sudden change, but because something in the air had grown softly brighter. Their mind rose from sleep the way a leaf rises to the surface of still water, slowly, peacefully, without hurry. They opened their eyes to a room washed in a dim, silver blue light. The small, high window admitted a piece of the night sky, where the moon had shifted to a new place over the ridge. The shadows on the ceiling had changed shape, stretching in calm, elongated patterns. For a few moments, the traveler simply lay there, feeling the weight of the blankets, the quiet ache of tired muscles now softened to a pleasant heaviness, and the deep, restful stillness that had taken root inside their chest. At their feet, they felt a warmth. When they gently moved their legs, the warmth moved too, and they heard the faintest, most soothing sound, a soft, low purr, like a tiny hidden stream running through the silence. The black cat turned its head and looked up at them with eyes that reflected the silver light. There was no sense of urgency in its gaze, only a calm, patient invitation. It rose in a graceful stretch, arching its back, then stepped lightly along the blanket until it stood near the traveler's side. Then it jumped to the floor, landing without a sound, and walked a few paces toward the half-open door. There, it paused and glanced back, the tip of its tail drawing a slow curve in the air. The gesture was clear, even in the soft light. An offer, not a demand. Come, if you wish. Come, if you are ready to see a little more of this quiet place. The traveler sat up slowly, feeling the gentle pull of rest still clinging to their limbs, but also a new clarity in their thoughts. The weariness that had driven them up the mountain felt lighter now, as though much of it had been set down somewhere along the way. Perhaps in the folds of the blankets, perhaps in the deep listening of the stone walls. They swung their legs over the side of the bed and let their feet find the cool floor. Their boots rested nearby, neatly placed as they had left them. They slid them on again, lacing them with unhurried fingers. The air in the room was cool but not harsh, and when they drew in a breath, it tasted faintly of old wood and linen and the clean, neutral chill of snow outside. On the small table beside the bed stood something they had not clearly noticed before. A simple oil lamp with a round base and a short, curved spout, its wick neatly trimmed. Beside it lay a small flint and steel, ready as if they had been placed there in gentle anticipation. The traveler hesitated only a moment, then reached for them. With a few careful, patient motions, a spark caught the wick, and a tiny flame awoke. It grew steadily into a soft, steady glow, neither too bright nor too dim. The light it cast was warm and slightly golden, but its warmth mixed with the silver of the moonlight until the room felt wrapped in a peaceful, tender radiance, halfway between night and day, between dream and waking. The cat watched this with half-closed eyes, as though satisfied. When the lamp burned quietly, without flicker or smoke, it turned and padded out into the corridor. The traveler lifted the lamp by its small handle, shielding the flame with one hand, and followed. The corridor received them with its familiar hush, made gentler now by the amber circle of light that moved along the stone. The moon still shone through the high windows, but its light was softened by cloud in places, leaving some stretches of the hall in deeper shadow. Wherever the traveler passed, the lamplight filled those shadows with a mild, golden calm, revealing the worn edges of steps, the curve of arches, the quiet patience of benches sitting along the walls. The cat led them unerringly toward the heart of the abbey, to the door that opened into the library. Earlier in the night, the cat had walked there alone, through a room lit only by the pale beams of the moon. Now, As the traveler pushed the door gently wider, the lamplight spilled into the space and mingled with the silver shafts that fell from the high windows. The two lights met without conflict, folding together into a soft, layered illumination that made the room feel warmer, more intimate, yet still spacious and deeply calm. The long shelves rose on either side, their rows of books catching the dual glow along their spines. The dust in the air shimmered slowly, as though each tiny particle had been awakened just enough to float more consciously in the gentle brightness. The traveler stepped inside, and the cat leapt lightly onto the central table, where the broad, scarred surface lay half in shadow, half in light. The traveler set the lamp down near the center. Its flame shone against the wood like a small, tamed star, and its light spread over the surrounding objects with loving care. A loose sheet of parchment revealed faded lines of script that curled like delicate vines. A bookmark, left long ago between the pages of a forgotten volume, cast a thin shadow that reached out across the grain. The traveler felt drawn to these quiet details. They pulled a chair out from the table and sat, the wood creaking softly beneath their weight. And for the first time since crossing the threshold of the abbey, they felt not only like a guest, but like a reader inside a waiting story. The cat settled near the lamp, curling its body into a small, dark circle, with its head turned outward, as though listening not only to the room, but to the traveler as well. Its eyes glowed faintly in the lamplight, then closed halfway, the purr returning, a low and steady accompaniment beneath the silence. The traveler's gaze wandered to the nearest shelf, where several books stood slightly more forward than the others, as if they had been handled more often long ago. One of them, bound in simple brown leather with its title almost worn away, seemed to draw the eye more than the rest. The traveler rose, reached for it, and felt the dry, gentle texture of the cover under their fingers. When they brought it back to the table and opened it carefully, the pages gave a soft sigh, releasing a faint scent of old paper, ink, and something else, perhaps chamomile, perhaps lavender, perhaps a summer long forgotten. Inside, the book held stories written in a clear, rounded hand. They were not grand histories or complex teachings, but simple tales, each only a few pages long. There were stories about the changing seasons on the mountain, about a small bird who returned to the same branch each spring, about a child who planted an apple seed and waited many years for its first blossom, about a tired traveler who found shelter in a house of strangers and left with a heart soothed rather than filled. There were gentle fables of kindness passed quietly from one person to another, of forgiveness offered like a cup of warm tea, of patience that grew slowly like moss along a stone. The words did not shout or demand. They flowed calmly, like a little stream slipping over smooth pebbles. The traveler began to read. At first, they read silently, eyes moving slowly over each line, following the quiet curves and strokes of the script. Then, almost without deciding to, they let their voice enter the room in a low, soft murmur. The sound of it surprised them a little, for they had not heard their own voice much on the mountain path, where their breath had been reserved for climbing. Here, in the warm circle of lamplight, their words came gently, unforced, as if the abbey itself was listening with patient interest. The stories, spoken aloud, seemed to grow a second life in the library's air, as though the room recognized them and was pleased to hear them again. The cat's ears twitched slightly at the sound and then relaxed, accepting it. Its purr deepened, blending with the slow rhythm of the traveler's reading. The flame of the lamp steadied, as if leaning closer to listen. The moonlight from the high windows traced soft, silver patterns along the edges of shelves and the tops of books, while the golden lamplight pooled around the table, making the reader and the cat and the open pages into a small island of warmth within the larger, peaceful sea of shadow. Each page turned with a quiet rustle, each turned page another step deeper into a shared, gentle dream. As the traveler read, they felt something inside their chest continue to loosen and unwind. The stories were mild, but they carried a steady, comforting strength, like a hand resting lightly over a racing heart until the beating slowed. They spoke of small acts and quiet days, of people who learned slowly to be softer with themselves and others, of places where the world moved at a calm, patient pace. In these stories, sorrow was not ignored, but it was held carefully until it grew lighter, like a heavy cloak slowly sliding from the shoulders. Reading them, the traveler felt their own burdens, those unspoken worries and half-forgotten pains they had carried up the mountain, gently acknowledged, and then surrounded by a broader, kinder stillness. Little by little, they began to understand something about the abbey that went beyond its stone walls and snow-covered roofs. This place had not only kept prayers and bells and books, it had also kept these stories, these soft threads of human hope and gentleness, safe within its quiet rooms. Even now, with no monks walking the corridors and no choir filling the chapel with song, the abbey still held its purpose like a hidden flame, to offer rest, to cradle memories, to give tired hearts a space where they might remember the simple, peaceful truths they had forgotten on their way through harsher days. The library was not merely a room of books. It was a listening space, a place where words that had once soothed others could rise again and offer their calm to anyone who needed it. The cat, though it could not read the letters, seemed to sense this too. Its body lay utterly relaxed, yet some attentive part of it remained awake, as though it shared in the gentle work of the night, the work of keeping the quiet whole and warm, of making sure that the stories did not sink into silence without being heard. Every now and then, it opened its eyes just enough to look at the traveler, as if to be sure they were still there, still breathing easily, still wrapped in the soft rhythm of the book. Satisfied, it would close its eyes again, trusting the lamp and the words and the old stone walls to do their part. Time in the library flowed in a smooth, unbroken line. The traveler lost track of how many pages they had turned, how many tales had passed beneath their voice. They only knew that the lamplight had grown even gentler, the flame burning a little lower, and that their own eyelids felt heavier, as though each story had woven another layer of soft cloth over their thoughts. At last, their voice grew slower, the words stretching into longer pauses, their breath deepening between sentences. They finished one more simple story, a tale about a person who learned, at last, to rest, and then closed the book with a careful, tender motion, as if not wanting to wake something sleeping inside it. For a few moments, they simply sat there, hands resting on the cover, eyes half closed, feeling the deep, peaceful silence settle once more around them. The flame in the lamp flickered softly, then steadied, its light now dimmer, more like the last glow of an evening ember. The cat uncurled and stood, stretching with a small, luxurious shiver, then stepped closer to the traveler. It brushed its head lightly against their hand, the touch a quiet thank you, or perhaps a gentle suggestion that it was time to rest more fully. Together, they left the library as they had entered it, the traveler carrying the lamp, the cat walking ahead in calm assurance. The shelves, the books, and the dust returned to their patient slumber, with the soft echo of spoken stories still lingering in the air like a faint, comforting perfume. In the corridor, the lamplight moved once more along the stone, then turned down the passage toward the small room where blankets and a quiet bed waited. When at last the lamp was extinguished and the traveler lay down again, sleep came even more easily than before, folding over them like a warm, soft tide. The black cat took its familiar place nearby, and the abbey, listening with its old, gentle heart, held them both within its silver and golden quiet, while outside the snow continued to fall in peaceful, endless, dreamlike silence. Dawn began long before the sun rose, in colors so faint and gentle that they seemed almost like a dream breathed into the edges of the night. The deep blue sky outside the small windows slowly softened, taking on a quiet hint of gray that was more feeling than sight. The stars grew paler, not going out all at once, but dimming as if they were simply drifting farther away. Over the mountain, a thin line of silver light appeared, delicate and distant, touching the highest ridges first. Inside the abbey, the darkness relaxed its hold, the shadows thinning, the corners of rooms softening into a calm, bluish half-light that felt cool and peaceful, like the final moments of sleep before waking. The black cat stirred while the world was still mostly dark. It opened its eyes in the small guest room, where the traveler lay under the blankets, breathing deeply and evenly. The cat watched for a moment, listening to that slow, steady breath and to the soft hush of the abbey. Somewhere far below the stone, water moved under ice, the buried river turning in patient silence. Outside, the wind had quieted almost completely, as if it too were waiting for the first touch of morning. The cat rose without sound, stretched with a long, gentle curve of spine and tail, and padded silently to the tiny window. Pressing its paws to the sill, it looked out at the sky, gauging the light, sensing that the night's long embrace was loosening and that it was nearly time for the guest to see the world in its new, daylit softness. A faint, pale glow had begun to gather along the horizon, where the line of mountains parted just enough to let the coming day peek through. The snow on the higher slopes caught this early light, not yet golden, not yet bright, but gently luminous, like breath on glass. The cat turned from the window and moved back to the traveler's side. It jumped lightly onto the bed and walked slowly along the blankets until it reached their shoulder. There, it settled its small weight and sat for a moment, watching their face, which was peaceful and calm. The lines of strain softened into something younger, almost childlike. Then the cat leaned forward and touched its nose just once to the traveler's hand. A soft, brief contact that carried with it the slightest whisper of warmth. The traveler's fingers twitched, then relaxed again. A little later, their breath changed, deepening and then lifting, like a tide turning. Their eyelids fluttered, and they woke in the gentle manner of someone who has slept in safety, not jolted into awareness, but brought back slowly by light and the soft insistence of their own rested body. When they opened their eyes, the room was full of a dim blue hush. The lamp on the table stood extinguished, its wick a quiet thread, and the small window held a piece of sky that was no longer black, but the softest gray blue, like the inside of a shell. The traveler became aware of the warmth at their side and looked down to see the black cat gazing up at them, golden eyes bright in the muted light, expression calm and steady, as if to say, "It is time to rise. The night has finished its work. The day is ready to begin." They sat up slowly, savoring the feeling of a body that, though still tired from the long climb, felt rested deep inside, as if something in their soul had been gently returned to its proper place. The cold in the room was present, but not sharp. It wove cleanly around them, waking their skin without biting. They swung their legs over the side of the bed, their feet finding the floor with ease this time, not the heaviness of the night before. The cat jumped down with them, landing neatly and trotting ahead toward the door, pausing there with a small, unhurried air of expectation. The traveler dressed and pulled on their boots and cloak, fingers working more fluidly now, and when they were ready, they opened the door to follow their quiet guide into the waking abbey. The corridor lay in a tender gray light, touched here and there by streaks of pale silver, where snow-reflected dawn entered through the high windows. The shadows were no longer dense. They had become soft, like folds of cloth rather than pools of darkness. The stone walls seemed less imposing in this early hour, their roughness muted, their coldness balanced by a sense of age that now felt companionable rather than distant. As the traveler walked, their steps made a low, comforting sound on the floor, blending with the faint creaks of beams adjusting to the change in temperature and the far-off drip of melting ice somewhere beyond the walls. The air carried a different scent now, to a hint of morning, fresh and almost sweet, as if the snow outside had been stirred lightly by the coming light. The cat led them toward the cloister. When they passed through the archway into the covered walk, the traveler felt their breath catch, not in shock, but in a quiet, wondering admiration. The cloister garden, which had been a square of white mystery the night before, now appeared in soft relief. The snow, still deep and clean, glowed in a pale, bluish tone, reflecting the early sky. The bare tree in the center rose up like a delicate drawing in ink, each branch lightly edged with frost that caught the first hints of color. The sky above the open square was no longer uniform. Along one edge, faint strokes of pink and peach had begun to bloom, gentle and translucent, like watercolor brushed across paper. The silence held, but it was a new kind of silence, full of possibility, full of breath that had not yet been taken. They walked slowly along the covered side of the cloister, boots making soft impressions on the dusting of snow that had drifted in near the columns. Their cloak brushed the stone with the faintest of sounds, and the cat's paws moved ahead in small, precise steps. The traveler watched their little guide pause near the base of the tree, circle it once, and then look back with a slight tilt of the head, as if inviting them to truly see what lay before them. The garden, the snow, the tree, the rising colors in the sky, all of it formed a single, quiet picture, imbued with a calm that seemed to travel straight into the heart. The traveler felt something inside grow gentle and still, as if the restlessness that had driven them up the mountain had been replaced by a clear, soft listening. From the cloister, the cat led them next into the chapel. It pushed its way through the half-open door, and the traveler followed, carrying the dawn with them into the quiet room. The chapel, which had been silver and blue in the night, now received the first color of day. The stained glass windows, which had been dark and muted, began to glow from behind as the hidden sun touched their faces. Soft, diffused blues and reds and golds seeped into the stone, gathering on the floor and the benches in pools of hushed color. It was not yet bright. The light felt delicate, like a promise rather than a fulfillment. The altar stood in its place, simple and still, but the narrow window above it now held a piece of sky where the pale gold of sunrise had begun to gather. The traveler moved down the aisle more slowly this time, not as a guest, unsure of their place, but as someone who had been gently welcomed and now walked in trust. They chose a bench and sat, laying one hand lightly on the smooth wood beside them, feeling the faint warmth it had kept from centuries of resting palms. The cat leapt up and settled quietly at their feet, its body a small, steady presence against the stone. For a while, neither of them moved. The traveler did not speak. There was no need. The chapel did not ask for words. It asked only for presence, for breathing, for the simple act of being willing to sit in the soft company of light and stone and memory. In that quiet, the traveler felt gratitude rising, not sharp, not overwhelming, but as a gentle tide of warmth that spread out through their chest and into their limbs. When at last they rose again, the light in the chapel had grown a little stronger. The colors on the stone were clearer now, though still soft, and the sky in the narrow window had lightened into a pale, tender gold fading into blue. The cat hopped down and guided them back into the corridor. There was one more place to see before the day fully opened, and the cat turned its steps toward it with the calm certainty of long habit. They walked through the main hall, where the high windows now framed the gradual brightening of the sky. and then down the passage that led to the front of the abbey. Instead of stopping at the great door, however, the cat turned aside to a smaller one that opened to a narrow balcony overlooking the valley. The travelers stepped out into the morning air, and the world unfolded below them in soft splendor. The valley, seen in the full light of day for the first time, lay under a vast sheet of snow that shone with a gentle brightness, not harsh, but shimmering. Wisps of mist hovered over the low places where the buried river moved unseen, sending up faint exhalations that caught the light and turned to silver vapor. The village far below was waking. Thin curls of smoke rose from chimneys, and the small cluster of roofs looked as if someone had placed a handful of tiny, warm stones upon the white earth. The sky above was opening into a clear blue, with streaks of peach and gold near the horizon, where the sun, hidden by the mountain's edge, sent its light ahead like a quiet greeting. The travelers stood at the balcony's edge, hands resting lightly on the cold stone, their breath joining the morning air in soft, steady clouds. The black cat sat beside them, tail wrapped neatly around its paws, eyes half closed as if it knew this view well and wished the traveler to take their time with it. Looking down, the traveler could trace the path they had climbed the night before, the line of their own footprints now softened by a light dusting of new snow. It seemed a long way, and yet, seen from here, it also seemed gentle, as if the mountain had lifted them carefully rather than tested them. The abbey at their back, the valley at their feet, the sky spreading open above. Together, they formed a circle of quiet that held the traveler at its peaceful center. They did not want to leave, yet they knew, with the same calm certainty that had guided their steps, that they could not remain forever. The abbey was a place of rest, not a place of escape. It was a pause in the journey, a soft, silver-edged turning of the page, not the last line of the book. With this understanding came no sharp sorrow, only a mild, wistful tenderness, like the feeling of waking from a beautiful dream and knowing that its warmth would travel with them into the day. The cat seemed to sense the shift. It rose, brushed its side once against the traveler's leg, and then turned back toward the door, leading them again into the abbey's interior. Back in the small room, the traveler gathered their few belongings. The cloak was dry now, the pack lighter somehow, as if it no longer carried the same invisible weight. The bed, already smoothed by their rising, looked almost as if it had not been slept in at all, except for a slight hollow in the blanket where a body had rested and released its burdens into the night. They paused, letting their fingertips touch the edge of the mattress in a quiet, wordless farewell, then turned to find the cat waiting by the door once more. Together, they walked the length of the corridor toward the great entrance, passing each familiar arch and window with a new, softened awareness, as if each stone and beam were now a friend whose face they had finally learned to recognize. At the threshold, the travelers stopped. The heavy door loomed before them, but now it seemed less imposing, more like the cover of a beloved book that one closes gently after reading. The cat sat directly beside their feet, close enough that they could feel the warmth of its fur through their boots. They bent down and extended a hand, and the cat, with grave, unhurried acceptance, pressed its head into their palm. Its fur was soft and thick and carried the faint scent of stone and dust and something warmer, like sunlight remembered from another season. The traveler's fingers moved along its head and behind its ears in a slow, grateful caress. For a long, quiet moment, the abbey's only sound was the gentle purr that rose from the cat's small chest, a sound as soothing as a distant, steady bell. Then, with a last soft stroke, the traveler straightened, set their hand to the door, and eased it open. Cold air flowed in, bright with the scent of snow and pine and a new day beginning. The light outside was clear and pale, the shadows sharp and yet not unfriendly. They stepped out onto the snow-covered threshold, and for an instant, as the door stood open, the abbey and the world met in a shared, luminous breath. Far above, unseen in the tower, the bell gave the gentlest tremor, not a full chime, but a memory of one, like a single drop of silver falling into the great, quiet pool of morning. The traveler turned once to look back. The doorway framed the dim interior, where the cat stood in the band of shadow, golden eyes shining softly. No words were exchanged, yet everything that needed saying was held within that glance. Gratitude, blessing, a promise carried in the heart rather than spoken aloud. Then the door moved slowly inward, closing as easily and peacefully as it had opened. The traveler faced the slope, drew a calm breath, and began to descend the mountain path, leaving behind them a line of fresh footprints that led away from the abbey, but not away from its gentle, silver memory, which would now walk with them, soft and quiet, wherever the road might lead. When the door closed behind the traveler and their footsteps faded into the soft, bright distance of the morning, the abbey settled once more into its familiar, quiet rhythm. The snow on the slope slowly erased the newest line of prints, filling in each hollow with fine, powdery crystals until the path looked untouched again, smooth and patient beneath the pale sky. Inside the walls, the little disturbances of the guest's visit, the faint warmth left in the blankets, the traces of breath in the still air, the gentle echo of spoken stories in the library slowly sank into the abbey's deeper silence, not to be lost, but to be folded tenderly into its long memory. The black cat stood for a while near the great door, listening to the quiet, feeling the soft emptiness where another presence had been. Then it turned away with calm acceptance and padded back into the dim corridors that it knew so well, as if resuming a song after a brief, sweet pause. Life in the abbey did not change in any sudden way. Days and nights continued to pass with their gentle, measured steps. Snow fell, rested, and melted. Clouds drifted, gathered, and opened. The wind came and went in soft, silver currents, wrapping the stone in its endless, quiet arms. Yet something subtle had settled deeper into the walls since the traveler's visit, a warmer kind of stillness, a slightly softer echo in the chapel, a sweeter hush in the library. The cat sensed it without thinking about it, the way it sensed the difference between night and dawn. When it walked through the corridors now, the air felt just a little fuller, as if a new story had joined the many old ones resting there. A story of arriving tired and leaving calm, of being welcomed without words, of sleep that had reached all the way to the bottom of a weary heart. The cat's rounds remained the same in their gentle pattern. At dusk, when the sky faded from blue to violet and the first stars pricked through the thinning light, it woke from its daytime rest and began its slow circuit. It moved along the main hall, where windows caught the last colors of the sky. Then through the cloister, where the garden lay in quiet, changing shades white and silver in winter, green and shadowed in the brief summer, gold and soft brown in autumn. It visited the chapel, slipping between the benches, pausing before the altar in the calm, colored glow of the glass. It returned to the library, where the shelves stored their sleeping words, and where, some nights, the memory of a low human voice reading seemed to tremble faintly in the air, like the lingering fragrance of distant flowers. It climbed the bell tower, letting the high wind brush its whiskers and the stars reflect in its eyes. Each night, each place, each pause was part of a quiet, endless circle of care. As seasons turned on the mountain, the world around the abbey changed its colors, but its gentleness remained. In spring, when the snow began to shrink back from the stones and dark earth appeared in small, timid patches, the cat would sit in the cloister and watch the first blades of grass push through, thin and determined. Tiny flowers opened shyly along the garden's edges, and a few birds, cautious but curious, hopped along the walls and peered in at the silent quadrangle of stone and sky. The abbey did not call them, yet it did not repel them either. It simply offered a space where life could move softly, unhurried. The cat, guardian of quiet things, watched over these small awakenings as carefully as it watched over the books and the bells, its steady presence weaving them all into one peaceful tapestry. In summer, the mountain's breath grew warmer, and the air smelled of sun on stone, of pine from the lower slopes, of green things stretching themselves slowly toward the light. The snow retreated higher, clinging to the highest ridges and hidden hollows, while the valley below deepened in color and sound. From the bell tower, the cat could see the fields brightening, the river shining more clearly, the tiny figures of villagers moving about their days. Sometimes, faintly carried on the wind, came the distant murmur of voices, the laughter of children, the bark of dogs. Yet, even in this livelier season, the abbey remained a still, pale shape above it all, a quiet watchtower of peace. The cat lay in the high places then, letting the soft sun warm its fur, listening to the low hum of life below, and sending its own silent, gentle watchfulness outward, like a calm thought drifting on clear air. Autumn came with its slower days and its long, soft evenings. Leaves in the hidden valley woods turned to amber and rust, drifting down to lay a quiet, colorful blanket over the ground. The light grew richer, more golden, deepening the shadows in the cloister and warming the stone in the late afternoons. The cat began to choose its resting places with a keener sense of warmth, curling nearer to sheltered corners, seeking the last patches of sun that slid along the floors. Inside, the abbey's silence felt thick and kind, like wool pulled close around the shoulders. The memories of many seasons layered softly over one another. Echoes of spring birds, summer winds, autumn leaves, and within those layers, like a newly added thread of silver, lay the remembrance of the traveler's footsteps and the sound of their low voice reading stories by lamplight. Then winter would return, reweaving the mountain in white. Snow crept back down the slopes, filling the folds, rounding the rocks, sketching soft, bright edges on the roofs and walls. The air grew sharp and clear. The stars looked nearer again, as if leaning closer to gaze at the sleeping earth. The villagers in the valley, gathered around their fires on long nights, would sometimes speak of the abbey above them. They would say it was deserted now, its rooms empty, its halls cold. Some said that on certain nights they heard a bell ring once, softly, in the dark, too faint to be the wind, too gentle to be a storm. A few spoke of seeing, against the snow line on moonlit evenings, a small, dark shape moving along the walls, a shadow that walked as gracefully as a cat. They shrugged and smiled and shook their heads, unsure whether they had truly seen anything at all. The abbey, to them, was a place of stories and dreams, distant and unreal. But on those nights when the bell gave its quiet, silvery tremor, and the wind carried the slightest suggestion of sound down the mountain, something soft moved through the valley's sleep. Children, tossing in their beds after a day full of noise and running, would suddenly find their bodies relaxing, their minds loosening their hold on the bright, busy images of waking. Their dreams would turn gentle, filled with slow falling snow, with calm, starry skies, with friendly animals trotting beside them along safe paths. Older hearts, burdened with cares and small, stubborn worries, would feel those worries grow lighter for a few hours, as if some unseen hand had lifted them and set them down on a distant shelf. They did not know why sleep came easier on those nights, why their thoughts smoothed out like windless water. But far above, in the quiet abbey, the black cat's golden eyes shone in the dark as it carried its rounds, and its silent, steady watchfulness moved through stone and air like a blessing. Even when no travelers climbed the path for many months, the cat kept its gentle routine, never hurried, never restless. It checked the doors, not because it expected them to open, but because doors were boundaries, and boundaries needed quiet care. It walked the corridors, not to chase away any threat, but to keep the abbey's memories company, so they would not sink too deep into forgetfulness. It visited the chapel and the library, the cloister and the tower, like a soft pulse of life moving through a place that others called empty. And in this constancy, in this calm care, the abbey remained alive, not in the noisy way of bustling houses and busy streets, but in the deep, peaceful way of a heart that continues to beat quietly, even while the body sleeps. Sometimes, On very still nights, when the sky was clear and the moon poured silver over the snow until everything shimmered, the cat would sit in one of the high windows and look out over the valley. It would watch the tiny, scattered lights of homes shining in the dark, each one a small, warm star resting on the earth. Its gaze, steady and soft, would travel over rooftops and fields, over frozen river and sleeping road, as though it were tracing invisible paths of comfort from one resting place to another. It could not know the names of the people sleeping beneath those roofs, could not know the shapes of their worries or the colors of their hopes, but in the quiet way that belonged to it, the cat would hold them all in a tender, wordless thought, the way it held the chapel and the library and the bell. And so the Silent Abbey, high on its mountain, never truly slept alone. It dreamed softly through its walls and windows, and the black cat moved gently through that dream, keeping it whole, keeping it kind. The snow would come and go. The stars would wheel and drift. The seasons would turn and turn again. Travelers might climb the path once more, drawn by a story they could not explain, and find a door that opened more easily than it should, a room warmed by a stillness that felt like a welcome, a library where the dust seemed glad to be disturbed by turning pages, or they might never come. And still, the abbey would keep its patient promise, resting on the mountain like a folded hand of stone, while the cat's quiet steps stitched night after night into one long, peaceful tapestry. If you listen, in your own quiet moments, you might almost hear it, the soft pad of paws along a forgotten corridor, the faint shimmer of a bell that no one rings, the hush of snow falling in a square of cloistered air. You might feel, just as you drift toward sleep, that something gentle and watchful has drawn near, not to ask anything of you, not to disturb, but to sit quietly at the edge of your dreams, the way the black cat sits at the edge of the valley sky. And as your thoughts grow slow and silver and peaceful, as the world outside your window softens into night, may the Silent Abbey on its mountain and its small, faithful guardian send you their calm. May your worries grow light as snowflakes, your breath grow deep and even, and your mind grow soft and quiet as starlight on stone. May you rest under a sky of deep, tender blue, and may sleep come to you gently, softly, and completely, carrying you into dreams as calm and silver and peaceful as the Silent Abbey itself.